BookTube, welcome back to my channel. Today we're here with a library haul. I picked up 7 books from the library in the last few days. I want to share them with you, but before we get started, I need an accessory. I've seen the men doing it, and I thought I'd represent the ladies and get in on the hat action. I don't know why it's become a trend on BookTube for you to wear a hat when you're making a BookTube video about books, bookish library tour, bookshelf tour, hauls, I don't know, but I'm wearing a hat for this video. 7 books to tell you about, so we're just gonna get into it. I haven't read any of these yet, so I don't have detailed descriptions of the books. I'm just going to tell you what I know so far from the very limited research that I have done. But all of these are books that I've wanted to read for some time, and I'm finding a reason to pick them up. The first 4 I think I'm going to tell you about are to participate in Gone with the Book readathon, which started yesterday. If you haven't watched my Gone with the Book video where I shared some recommendations as well as the books that are on my TBR to participate in this readathon, which covers the last 7 days of September, October, and November, I'm going to link my previous video in the description box down below so you can go ahead and check it out. The objective of Gone with the Book is to read books that were published between 1900 and 1950, and I have 4 of them here. A couple of them are books that were published in America. One of them is a translated novel, and let me just tell you what the books are, right? Why all this suspense? The first book is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I have never read anything by this author, and she is beloved here on BookTube and the BookTube community, and the bookish community in general. Everyone I know has recommended this author to me, and I think this is supposed to be her most loved novel, maybe her most famous novel. So I'm starting with this one, published in the 1930s, I believe. I'm going to tell you what I know about the synopsis, even though it's probably very familiar to you because you've probably read it. Rebecca is not the name of the main character. Our main character is a young woman who has just gotten married and has moved into the home of her new husband, but he's widowed. His previous wife's name was Rebecca. And while this young woman is trying to find her own space in this house, she's being haunted, maybe not necessarily in the supernatural way, but memories of this former mistress of the house pervade every aspect of their lives. And so it seems to be about her trying to claim her own space as she exorcises the memories of the former Mrs. Maxim de Winter, aka Rebecca. Want to read that one. Not sure if I'm going to get to it in September. One of the reasons is I get these books from the library. I reserve them, they come in on hold, and this is a pretty beat up copy. I brought it home just because, well, it had come in on my reserve shelf, but it's an older book than I would rather read, so I'm gonna try to see if I can get my own copy. If I can get a copy for a reasonable price online, I'll buy my copy and return this to the library and read my own version instead. Yes, I'm a book snob. We'll talk about that another time. The next book that I got from the library is one that I'm really excited about, and that's because this is a Penguin classic and it is obvious that it has not yet been read. So I love when I get books from the library and I'm the first reader. It's like getting a brand new book for free because after I've read it, then I can return it to the library. I don't have to worry about storing it. Didn't have to think about paying for it, and definitely don't have to think about storing it. So very happy to report that I have a brand new Penguin copy of A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. And this one is about another young woman who is about to be married, or will she? She seems to be a middle class or maybe even upper class woman who goes on vacation overseas. And while she's there, she meets a man and his son, and she falls for them. But when she returns home, she is also in a relationship. She becomes engaged, and she is torn between following what should be the proper thing to do to continue with the relationship with her now fiance, or can she return to this lower class man that she met overseas? And so A Room with a View seems to be about a love triangle, or maybe even love square, because one of the men that she is interested in has a child who seems to be maybe one of the reasons that her heartstrings are being tugged at. I don't know. We'll see. This was published in 1908, so it's also one of the books that's on my Gone with the Book readathon TBR. And then the next one is a translated novel that I've been wanting to read for a really long time, The Stranger by Albert Camus. And this was published in 1942. It is a really short book. I'm planning to read it this week because it's 123 pages. And if I can read it really quickly, I can add another book to my tally for my 30 books in 30 days goal. This one is about a man who witnesses a murder, and he seems to not know any of the people who are involved in this crime, but he gets caught up in it, which is why the title is about the stranger. Who's the stranger in this story? I'm not sure. We'll get to it when we read more about it. This is translated from French and part of my Gone with the Book TBR. Last one on my Gone with the Book TBR is one that I've become more and more interested in because I'm reading right now The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, which is about the great migration of African Americans from the south of the United States to the north of the United States. And somehow in the American history, there have been so many periods of migration covered, and The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck is also a novelization of another of the great migrations that happened. This one was a Dust Bowl migration that happened in the 1930s, where people left their homesteads. This one covers a family that's leaving their homestead in Oklahoma and trying to make it west to the promised land of California. And because I'm so invested in the story about the great migration of African Americans moving from the south to the north as a result of racial injustice and segregation and Jim Crow laws, I'm also fascinated by the movement of these farmers, homestead owners, and they're moving for very different reasons, but ultimately everyone's trying to find new opportunities wherever they're going. So looking forward to reading this one as well. This one is a bigger book, way bigger book, almost 500 pages, 470 something. So I might not get to this one this month, but I'll put it on my TBR. So the 15 books that I shared with you on my TBR span the 7-day period of the 3 months. So even though this is a library book, I don't think it's a really popular one. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to renew it and maybe keep it until October to read it then. So those are the 4 books that I have out that are for Gone with the Book readathon. I also have another huge book that I'm going to be reading over the next month or two. The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. This one is 1,200 pages. Yeah. This is a Penguin cloth-bound classic. You don't get these books from the library very often, so I'm really happy that this one came in, and it is in such good condition that it feels like it's mine. I think I'm going to buy my own copy though, because I'm going to be reading this over 2 months. I'm participating in a read-along with Dee from Brown Girl Reading, and she started a Goodreads group, so I don't know how many other people are going to be signing up. And we're going to be reading this one, like I said, over the course of 2 months. I feel like over that period, I'm going to need to make notes, and I'm probably going to want to keep those notes in my book. So even though I requested this one from the library, I'm still probably going to try to get my own copy. But I want this edition. There are so many editions, there's so many versions of this book, and many of them are abridged. Some of them are translated by different translators, and so they're slightly different in their representation of the story. But I've heard that this one is the closest to the original, and so I want to read this one. I also potentially want to own this one, but that's for another time. This story, you probably know it, this is a classic. The Count of Monte Cristo is about a sailor who is wrongfully accused of a crime, it seems, and is thrown into jail for a long period, separating him from his, is it a fiance or family? And while he's in prison, he learns about a treasure and becomes a little fixated, I suppose, on the idea of escaping the jail so he can get the money to get revenge on the people who accused him and put him in that position in the first place. That's all I know about the story. You're probably way more familiar with it, but I'll tell you more about it when I read it. I'm going to be reading this over October and November, pacing ourselves. 1,200 pages over 2 months. I think I can do that with ease. I hope. The next one I got is a reread for me, and this is J.M. Coetzee's Disgrace. I read this one last year. I'll be rereading it this year for my 2019 Man Booker Reading Challenge because this is a previous Man Booker winner. J.M. Coetzee won the Booker Prize twice for this book, as well as The Life and Times of Michael K., both of which I read last year and enjoyed and need to reread this year for my challenge. In any case, I'm pretty sure I own a copy of this book. I'm pretty sure, but I can't find it. So I'm going to read this one from the library and then think about acquiring a replacement for my own bookshelves. But synopsis of this one: Disgrace is set in South Africa, and the main character is a past middle-aged professor who's become embroiled in a scandal because he started an affair with one of his students, and she's reported him for overstepping his authority in her life. And rather than apologize and deal with the after effects of his actions, he decides to leave and go stay with his daughter, who is living in what he considers to be an unsafe environment because she's living among blacks, native Africans. And there's a lot about this story that captures the tense race relations between blacks and whites in South Africa. So I'm looking forward to rereading this one and reviewing it for you here on the channel. And the last book that I got out from the library is Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking. This is her memoir, and I think it covers two traumatic and tragic events that happened in her life during a very close timeline. One is the loss of her husband, and the other is the near loss of her child. And I've never read anything from Joan Didion before, but she appears on a lot of lists. Whenever I take these list challenges, something by Joan Didion always comes up. So I'd like to read something from her and see how I feel about her writing before I delve into other things that she's written. So Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking. So these are the 7 books that I got out from the library in the last few days, and I'm planning to read all of them soon. Sometimes I take books home from the library just to take them for a walk, it seems, because I take them home and I don't read them. But I do have specific plans to read each and every one of these, hopefully before the renewal date comes up and I have to pay a fine. I do, like I said, want to get a different copy of this one. It's really beat up, really old. And this one. I don't like when books are old. But we're gonna see. I'm gonna thumb through and wash my hands after each reading and see how I feel about them, and then potentially buy my own copy. So these right now are 7 books that I borrowed from the library, but there's a possibility that these are 7 books that I'll be buying from my own shelves at some point. So give me a thumbs up if you like this video, subscribe if you want to see more. Let's talk in the comments, and of course, let me know how you like the hat. So we'll talk down there. And until next time, happy reading. Bye.